Hey everybody, welcome to the show. This is your host Hunter McWaters. It's great to be with you guys as always. And this is my 150th episode. It's been a wild ride. I think it's been about 3 years now, almost exactly 3 years. And I think I've missed like just 2 or 3 weeks. I don't know. But I've been working hard, putting out podcasts every week, despite everything else going on. And I love it. I love all the conversations I'm able to have. I want to say a special thank you to you who've been listening from the beginning. You know, just like anything in life, sometimes it's hard because you wish you could grow and move and do things faster. But at the same time, you know, it's cool when you can just step back and take a look at what you've been able to accomplish in a short amount of time. So coming from where I started this thing to now, it's been great, and it wouldn't be possible without any of you guys. So if you're a new listener, thanks for joining. You're helping to grow this podcast and the show. If you've been listening for a long time, I really appreciate you guys. This is a fitting episode for 150. It was a rare but very enjoyable in-person episode here in my studio with my friend Ryan Munsey. So Ryan has some connections in the hunting industry. He's friends with Brian Barney. He's been on Brian Call's podcast and stuff like that because he wrote an amazing book a few years ago called F Your Feelings. And it's hard to describe. We go into it in the episode about the book, so I'm not going to harp on it here, but an awesome read. If you're into like optimal performance and, you know, personal development and all that stuff. Lots of crossover with hunting and fitness and spiritual development. So kind of hitting all the topics here on the Hunter's Quest podcast. And this is a great episode because both me and Ryan are from Virginia. Both of us are into fitness and all that stuff and personal development, like I just mentioned, and both of us killed our first elk this year. So he killed his on an over-the-counter general tag out west with a rifle. I killed mine, as you guys probably know, in New Mexico on a premium elk tag with an open sight muzzleloader. So we had different experiences, but we both learned a ton about elk hunting. And, you know, Ryan's been trying to kill an elk since 2019. This was my first official elk hunt, you know, really, to be honest. But it was, like I said, a different situation because I was in a high-demand New Mexico unit. Anyway, it's an awesome episode. If you are heading out west soon or dreaming of it to go after elk, or if you're an elk hunter, it's still interesting and still fun. It's a great conversation from our perspective as Virginia guys going out and killing our first elk. And the conversation is just really flows, and it's fun, and it's insightful because we're sitting here face to face. So if you're listening on audio, I encourage you to go check out the YouTube. It's pretty cool. We kind of show some things and talk about some things on camera. But anyway, it's a great episode. Super pumped to be putting out the 150th episode. And, you know, I keep asking you guys. I do it all the time. But, you know, I don't ask for much. But I do ask that you please just take a minute, if you can. If you haven't already, go to my YouTube channel and hit the subscribe button. That's probably the best thing you can do to help me out. Short of sending me a donation. Like I said, I've been working for years to put out great content, and I don't ask for much. Pretty much, well, yeah, everything I put out is free. So I hope you guys have been enjoying it, but I just ask if you can, hit the subscribe button on my YouTube. Even if you don't really like YouTube or you don't like subscribing, just do it for me. Just go and subscribe. It'll help me out. I promise you. And, you know, share my stuff on social if you can. Follow me there. Leave me a rating or review on Apple. All that stuff is helpful. I know I talk about it a lot, but I got to ask for your help because that's how I can continue doing this stuff and continue bringing you guys this content. I want to say thanks to my partners, especially Seekins Precision, Barnes Bullets, and Onyx Hunt. They have been instrumental in bringing Season 2 and Season 1 to life of the Hunter's Quest on the Sportsman channel. So keep an eye out. The Sportsman Channel show will be returning Q3 of next year with some amazing hunts, and I'm excited about some really cool YouTube releases as well. So, Oh yeah, which reminds me, if you are interested, I just recently released a new hunt film on the YouTube channel. It's a Coues deer hunt. It's the hunt I did last year with Brian Call, Ryan Lampers, and Brad Hunt. We went down to Mexico. I just released the episode where I slap a coyote in the beginning part of the hunt that me and Brad found, and then I end up killing a nice Coues deer buck, which is sitting right here behind me. So go check that out. Yeah, it's a fun hunt. I think it's well done, and I think you'll enjoy it. And I know a lot of guys are heading out for Coues this time of year, so go check that out while you're there. Subscribe, as I said before. Thank you guys for your support. Enjoy this episode today with Ryan Munsey. See you on the next one. All right, guys, welcome to the Hunter's Quest podcast. This is your host, Hunter McWaters, and today I'm joined by my friend Ryan Munsey for a rare but welcome change. I actually have a flesh and blood human here I'm talking to, not a Zoom meeting, so thanks for coming up, dude.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, and glad we could make it work.
Yeah, man. So Ryan lives about an hour, right, from here.
Yep.
Just a little bit of context if you guys haven't heard. We've done podcasts together before. I had you on early on, like when I was kind of first starting out, because I don't even know how, but I found Ryan's book. Ryan wrote a really cool book called F Your Feelings. And, yeah, give him like just a quick synopsis, like real quick synopsis on the book, just so people know what it's kind of all about.
Yeah, I guess the quickest, most complete explanation I could give is to say I've got a background in nutrition and fitness and coaching. I got out of the gym business because I was more curious about the question of why do people's actions not align with their stated goals? And I was more curious in solving that question than I was in, what are the sets and reps and diet that you need to get to your goals, right? Yeah. And I had the opportunity, had the gym from 2012 to 2016, and then from 16, actually starting in 15 until I wrote the book, I had the opportunity, I was hosting a podcast myself in the performance space, and got to work with a lot of Olympic athletes.
There's some really cool podcasts on there, by the way.
Are
you not doing it anymore?
So that was the Optimal Performance podcast.
Okay.
And
the Better Human Project.
That came later.
Oh, okay.
So Better Human Project launched when the book came out in early 2018.
Okay.
And then the OPP was one that I ran for another company. And through all of this work, I was interviewing academics and neuroscientists, as well as Olympic athletes and special forces guys, and working with them, I was able to see the what I would call like the theory of high performance, and then there's the application. Yeah. And so in the book, I'm attempting to answer that question of what does it mean to be a high performer? How do we align our actions with our values and our goals? Yeah. And what makes us deviate from that on a daily basis? How do we make sure that we can stay aligned with that and actually accomplish the things in our lives that we want to? And so, yeah, the title ended up writing itself as I was doing the research. Yeah. And one of the other working titles was The Neuroscience of High Performance. And
I'm glad you picked the one you did.
Nobody would have read that.
Yeah. And one of the concepts that I really like about it, and is also an audiobook, which is good for me, because I remember I actually listened to it like a couple times. Like I'd be out on runs listening to it. Really good stuff. And a lot about, we talked about more on this on the first podcast we did together way back. So if you guys are interested, I'd encourage you to go listen to it, because we kind of dive into this stuff a little more. But the thing that really stuck out for me was move the chains. It's like a phrase you say in there a lot, which is just like, get something on your list done that day, or get your work in that day. And it goes can go through professionally, fitness wise, nutrition, everything. Just kind of like so many people get paralyzed by the mountain of stuff they have to do or want to do, instead of but it really comes down to like move the chains that day, like knock one thing off the list, get that workout in, meal prep for the week, whatever it is, and just kind of move forward, man. So it's a super cool book. And you also have like lived a pretty interesting life. I feel like to this point, like you at one point were a model in New York City. I had to mention it.
Yeah, I usually try to hide that one, but yeah, I pretended or attempted to be Derek Zoolander for a little while.
And then, real quick, how did you move into hunting, or was hunting a part of your desire to, get to an optimal performance? Like how did you go into the hunting? Like, you're not fully in the hunting space, but you're kind of like a little bit in there. And like, so how did that kind of happen?
Yeah, it's a good question. So we were talking about this a little bit before we hit record. My dad did not hunt. He was and still is a big fisherman. So I grew up we were near the James River, so I grew up doing canoe trips on the James River. And my best friends in early high school and all the way through high school, actually, and even one of them, his birthday is today. So Adam, happy birthday. I know you won't hear this on your birthday, but their dad actually taught me how to hunt when we were in high school. So we grew up hunting and fishing. My dad would take us fishing, and
And you grew up kind of in the mountains of Southwest Virginia, right?
Yeah, just outside of Roanoke, Botetourt County. Yep. And so that's where I was introduced to hunting, and actually bow hunting. My first bow was a hand-me-down PSE from their dad, and Adam was a lefty, and so right away, like, I had experience with somebody shooting a bow left-handed. But it was something that I was immediately in love with. It just wasn't something that I had access to all the time.
Right.
When I had my gym, I started it in 12, and I would say somewhere around either 13 or 14, maybe 13, I bought a bow just to resume shooting. I had no intention of getting back into hunting, but I just remembered how much I loved shooting.
Yeah.
And so I bought a bow, and I would take it to the gym. We had this turf area in the gym, and when nobody was in there, I would just shoot.
Yeah.
And then it just so happened my parents moved onto a farm that year and started seeing deer out there. And I'm like, hey, Dad, I'm going to buy one. You care if I come out and start hunting? And so it evolved. He started, coming out, sitting in it with me. And, he was there for the first deer that I shot on their property. And it was the first kill that he had been a part of. And it just became something that I wanted to do more and more of, and do it as much as I could. And then I would have to say it must have been 2000, either 17 or 18. I was doing, I put something out on social media as like, put coaching calls on like, I was like, it's $50 for 20 minutes. Let's do like hot seat, like, rapid fire coaching sessions. And ended up doing one with a guy named Mike Lum, who ends up becoming a really good friend. He's a partner in a business that we've started in the hunting and outdoor space since then. And so Mike is a fly fishing guide on the Madison River in Montana. And he's a bow hunter. And at the end of our call, he's like, hey, if you ever want to come out here and either go fly fishing or try some elk hunting, let me know. And I was like, I'm just going to tell you right now. I'm interested. How do we do this?
I know. People always or a lot of times people drop little invites to me, and I'm like, dude, I will take you up on it. Be careful. Dude, don't say they don't mean it.
Do not offer me something if it's not serious.
Yeah, I'm the same way.
So he walked me through how to get an elk tag for the first time. And we decided to do rifle just because it would give me the most opportunity, first time hunting, going out west, whatever. So my first elk hunt was in 2019 in Montana with Mike. And again, first day out there, I just fell in love. The first time you go out there and you see how big it is, and
and plus coming from a fitness background, just like the level of challenge and mental challenge and physical,
that certainly played a part in hooking me, because I got my ass kicked. And I've made this joke a lot of different times, but I think the first day, we had this big hike in the morning, but it was all downhill.
Yeah.
And I didn't really pay attention to that. And so we're coming out at the end of the day, and man, it was a butt kicker. And thank God we weren't hauling a bull out of there, because I may not have made it. Now, I will say, in my defense, there are stories of like there are some guys with private land near there, and if they get a bull, they actually use a tractor and a winch to get their bulls out.
Yeah,
so it is pretty steep. But the next day we go to a different spot, and it's a big hike in, and we're hiking in the dark, and I'm cramping up and I'm struggling, and like every 10 minutes I'm like, Mike, I gotta stop. And I swear, like he had to have been thinking, like, am I gonna have to carry this guy up the mountain? And so, to your point, had that physical and mental challenge not been as big of a part of it, I don't think it would have hooked me, because I'm real ADD. I mean, I actually have ADD, and like it's hard for me, especially as an East Coast guy, like it's hard for me to sit in a tree stand. Like to this day, I think I've done one full day sit. Like I'm not going to.
I cannot do full day sits.
So even here on the East Coast, like I love it. Like even during the rut though, like I'll do a morning and maybe an evening, but I'm not all day. So the activity and all the things that make Western hunting what it is are what drew me to it.
Isn't it wild how, I mean, obviously you're very fit, you're like a gym owner, but isn't it wild how like it's a completely different type of fitness? Like you can be the most jacked dude, like, 5% body fat, and go out and get crushed by like this skinny, lanky looking dude who just grew up like hiking mountains.
Yeah. So before my first elk hunt, I was the guy that, I had two jokes about cardio. One was anything over 8 reps is cardio. And my second one was, if you see me running, you should run too. Like I didn't do cardio. And so, part of the reason I got destroyed physically was I wasn't prepared. I didn't do any, I had no aerobic base. And, to your point, a lot of what hunting has done for me and how it has given me something to focus on and work towards year round is it has forced me to change the way that I train. And then I still lift. I'm still a meathead. I like lifting heavy and, I've got a bodybuilding background. I like that. I'll never get fully away from that, but I do a lot more on the aerobic side, and I understand the demands of a Western hunt now in ways that I didn't before that first one.
Totally.
And Mike and I make the joke, like I was like, dude, why didn't you tell me what I was getting into? And he's like, well, I just figured like, you were in shape and you'd be fine.
Yeah.
Like Mike doesn't train for hunting. He just lives in the mountains.
He just hikes and stuff all
And
day.
he's one of those Montana mountain guys that, he just...
Oh, exactly.
Like if you went and hunted with him now, like his pace in the mountains, you're like, how is this guy walking this fast?
I know. Yeah, like this hunt I just did with Kobe Owens, who has hunted with your buddy, Brian Barney, which he's an animal. But my buddy Kobe, you put me up against Kobe in a CrossFit gym. I am destroying him. I'm lifting probably twice as much weight as him. But this dude can just go all day in the mountains. It's wild, man. It's just a different thing. And like, like I said, you grew up a little bit in the mountains. I literally grew up on like coastal plain, flat, nothing. So like, I definitely had to, and I still do, train very hard and very specifically for it. And that kind of, without going too much into the book, because I just want to talk about like our elk hunts this year, and we did already talk a lot about it, but the other thing that sticks out about the book for me, which, guys, I really can't recommend the book enough. Go check it out. Get a copy. Is the concept of stacking. And that's doing like an activity that has multiple different benefits. And you talk in detail about all these different things in the book. But I was like, when I was reading your book, I was like, man, this is hunting. It's like camaraderie, like with friends, quote unquote playtime, time in nature, sunlight exposure, cold exposure,
physical activity.
Like tons of different things are all taking place at the same
Technology
time.
detox.
Yeah, all in a hunt. And it's like, and that's why like, people from the outside might be like, wow, these guys are really obsessed with hunting. And yes, I am obsessed with hunting. But it's like, and Dan Staten talks about it a lot, and it's a way to leverage an activity that we love to do for fun to make your entire life better. Like, I'm a better man, person, dad now than I was before I started Western hunting. I think people from the outside might think that's a wild, like weird statement, but for me, it's true. I got in shape for a Western hunt. I stay in shape so I can do it. And obviously that's not the only thing, but part of getting in shape is building discipline, and that bleeds over into my spiritual life, my family life, everything. So It just can't be understated, I don't think.
No, it can't be. And I think for me, what's at the heart of that conversation is the fact that we are always becoming, right? As human beings, we are always becoming something, right? We're never done. And for us, hunting is one of those things that helps us become a better version of ourselves, right? So for me, being introduced to elk hunting in 2019, it was, oh, who do I have to become, or what version of myself do I have to become in order to be a person who consistently is able to get into and harvest elk?
Yeah.
Right? So it's not like, how do I become Brian Barney, but it's what version of myself do I have to be in order to achieve similar results? Right? And it's the fitness, it's the study, it's the practicing shooting, it's all of those things, right? And it's not, like I said, for us, hunting is one of those things, but it's everything that we participate in and pursue in life, right? So if you want to become, look at it from the business side of what you do, right? Or for anybody listening, if you want to be the CEO of a company, if you want to scale a company from 10 million a year to 200 million a year, what version of you is required to be the leader that can take those people and your team and build the organization and do that? Who do you, hunter, have to become in order to, make this media company and endeavor a success, so that you can support your kids and your wife and your family, and right? And so that's, again, back to the, why did I leave the gym and write the book? These are the questions that I find a lot more fascinating than what are the sets and reps, right? And this is the work that interests me, and that's what I do with the people that I work with. And it's cool that you pick up on that from the book. And like I said, that to me, that's what's at the heart of what you just kind of picked up on.
Yeah. And just last thing in the book is it's not like a hunting book. It's entrepreneurship. It's just development, personal development and growth. It's everything. So, it's a great read. It's very interesting and very helpful. Let me just adjust your mic really quick, because just in case, I don't think it is, but just in case it's rubbing.
Tried to set it up so it wasn't, but fine.
Okay, that's just safer.
Okay.
I think it's fine, but so your first elk hunt was 2019. Similar to me, you have a hunting background, but for me, it was I did my first Western hunt. I was all in, because it was it was almost like starting hunting all over again.
Yeah,
it's completely different. I mean, the amount of gear you got to learn about, because a lot of guys that live out west and come from out west take it for granted, but I didn't know anything about anything. I didn't know about boots.
Right.
I didn't know about food for a backcountry hunt. I'd never done a multi-day backpack thing at all, let alone adding in cold weather, trying to kill an animal, a rifle, trying to find animals. There's so much to it, and it can seem overwhelming, I think, and people maybe it seems insurmountable, or they want to go out and just do I'm just gonna do one elk hunt my whole life and I have to kill an elk. You know what I mean? But it's not like that. It's you have to really it sounds so cliche, but you have to really embrace the journey and learn to love getting in shape and adding that 1 or 2 or 3 pieces of gear per year and figuring out e-scouting, because there's a lot to it. So I don't know.
Yeah. So I think you did a good job of highlighting, I don't want to say the learning curve, but all of the components that go into hunting out west, right? And I can remember once I knew I was going to go on that first hunt in 2019, I can remember just diving in and trying to learn all of those things, right? I remember watching all the elk hunting videos so I could just try to learn what is it like when you're doing that? And then as you start watching that, you start getting introduced to, and this is where I think there are so many resources out there for people. Your podcast is amazing. You do a great job of helping people go from never being out there to doing their first Western hunt, and then all those stages of progression along that way, right? And Brian Barney's is a great one, and, and Gritty is a great one, and like Mark Livesey's e-scouting course, right? And like you start to, this is not something you can kind of be 1 foot in, 1 foot out, right? And when you dive in, you start to get introduced to these videos and these, whatever it is that you're watching. And at least for me, it was like, oh, well, I don't know anything about, like I've never shot, before I went out west, I'd never had a rifle shot that was longer than 150, 200 yards.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, we don't have that.
Out here on the East Coast, 200 yards is like, whoa, nice shot, man. And so, that's like the beginning of Western hunting.
Yeah, and so, then you've got to start to learn about, long-range ballistics and, like all this physics and, like, and so there's that. And then, and I also bow hunt. So there's the whole archery side of it. Like I had no idea, what FOC was and arrow weights and, like on the East Coast and, for deer hunting, it's just, at least in my world, it wasn't, right? And so you're learning about this. And like you said, you're learning about the gear and layering systems. And yeah, it can be overwhelming, but that's where like the move the chains things comes in, right? Yeah. It's like, let me learn about this, and then let me learn about this. And if you're going to hunt next year, you've got a full year to learn all of these things. And you have a lifetime to start to accumulate experience and reps and knowledge. And I think, for both of us, we're, 5 years into it now, and the amount of knowledge that we've been able to accumulate, again, like the technology makes information so much easier to get for us, right? And again, guys like Mark Livesey with his course, and I say that because that's been a big help for me. The people that we've both been introduced to and gotten to learn from, like I've said Brian Barney's name a couple of times, and I met him through Mike because they both lived in Ennis for a long time, and they've known each other for years. And guys like Mike and Brian, and there've been several others who have allowed me to tag along with them. And I'm sure for you, being in the field with Dan, you learn things from being on those hunts with people that, they don't have to bring us along, right? And so I think for anybody listening, if you can tag along with somebody that has that experience,
that's a great point.
You're going to learn so much more just by being in the arena and watching those people. That's invaluable too.
I was going to actually bring that point up too. Like, I talk a lot about like, DIY hunting, and you don't have to pay a guy, you don't have to wait years to hunt, and all that stuff is true. However, my first Western hunt, I went on, it wasn't a guide, but it was my friend who had much more Western hunting experience than I did, and so I learned a lot from him because it's just totally different. I mean, we could spend a whole podcast talking about the differences. We won't, but if you can team up with somebody, social media is pretty awesome now. Like you can legit and I'm not just, you can make connections on Instagram and probably find someone who will let you go hunting with them. Honestly, if that's your goal, you could probably find that. Or just, I don't know, but I do think that is helpful. Or, if you don't have that, there's nothing wrong with going on a guided hunt for your first hunt, and you don't have to go on some crazy, insanely hard archery elk hunt or high country mule deer archery hunt. Go, if you don't have the money for a guide, go on a 0-point antelope hunt and just learn some of the basic concepts of Western hunting and or go into the mountains of Virginia or Pennsylvania or whatever for a 2 or 3 day backpack hunt looking for whitetails, just getting some practice. So don't try to bite off more than you can chew. If you got a friend that can take you, do that. If you don't, there's nothing wrong getting a guide for your first trip, but then you can really start to figure it out and say, okay, I think I can replicate this. So on to what I kind of want to talk about a little bit. This is all great stuff, but you killed your first elk this year, and so did I, which is cool. You started elk hunting in 2019. You did a general season over-the-counter tag, and I'm not going to say what tag it was. If you want to, you can, but I'm not going to blow you up if you don't want to say it. But is an over-the-counter general rifle elk tag. Sure. There are opportunities out there, even if you're not point banking. But I will say, if you want to get into this game, start buying points now.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. Like, start with 2 or 3 states and just start buying them. Because right now I'm starting to get into that 4 or 5 point thing in like several states.
You've got options
it
now.
opens stuff up so much. Anyway, if you guys have questions, really quick, just if you have questions about those systems, or if you want to try to do a guided hunt for your first hunt, I have some connections that I've built over time through the podcast. I can help you find an antelope hunt or a mule deer hunt or even an elk hunt that's guided or semi-guided to help you learn. So hit me up on Instagram or hunter@thehuntersquest.com. I'll be happy to answer your questions about the stuff or even help you get on to book a hunt. Anyway, side note, but both of us, and I didn't mention this before, but we were talking about the book. So I read Ryan's book, and I was like, this dude's in Virginia. I think you mentioned Virginia Beach a couple times, and I was like, I gotta like link up with this dude. And you had moved out of Virginia Beach, was my hometown, but then we were able to kind of like actually link up in person because there's not many people like us out here doing what we do.
Right.
So yeah, man. So walk me through your hunt. You can say as much as you want or as little as you want about the actual tag, and walk me through starting with how you, because I know you e-scouted it. I saw your post the other day that Mark Livesey reposted. And that's a huge thing. It's something that I spend a lot of time doing and looking for opportunities. But since we live out here, we have to rely on e-scouting a lot because we can't just like fly out and go scout.
Right.
So walk me through kind of what your steps were on that.
Yeah, so I think going all the way back to like why this tag, right? Because I think that's an important part of the strategy. Like you, I'm accumulating points in several states. I would love to be able to hunt in Montana every year, but I'm not able to draw that tag every single year. And because I've got a couple of friends that I hunt with, I'm also trying to balance, who I'm hunting with each year and trying to get time with all my hunting buddies. And so this year, the plan was I was going to hunt with my buddy Zach, and we put in together in Montana, and we did not draw. And so that was our first option. And then I had, by listening to podcasts, discovered a state. It's on the post, so I might as well just say it. It's Utah. Utah had a new. They changed their regulations, and so they have new hunt seasons and new hunts for 2023. I think, at least it was new in my world, new to me. But they had 2 rifle seasons. And the first one was for a week in October, and then the second one was the following week. The first week, they limited it to 15,000 tags. The second week was truly unlimited. And the day that they went on sale was going to be like midsummer. I think it was sometime in July. So as far as like planning tags and hunts, we knew, okay, we can put in Montana. We'll find out whether or not we draw. If we don't draw, we'll have plenty of time for this as our backup plan. Yeah. If we wanted to put in Colorado, he had residency in Colorado, and he's in the military, so he has dual residency, and he was also hunting in September for archery in Oregon. And he got a cow with his bow in Oregon. Oh, so nice. He actually killed 2 elk this year, my buddy Zach. And so we just decided, hey, I've got experience over the last few years where I absolutely know that elk are still bugling in October. And when I saw that there was a rifle hunt in October, I was really excited for the opportunity to potentially chase bugling bulls with a rifle. And so we said, hey, that's going to be our backup plan. And again, it was over the counter, and we figured, hey, 15,000 tags, we'll be able to get one. And if we can't get the first week, then we'll go the second week. Yeah. And we just knew, like, hey, that's a lock, that's guaranteed, at least the second week. So that was our plan. And as soon as I knew that was a plan, then I started breaking down, okay, it's a general unit.
How many units are open in that tag?
So I don't remember exactly how many, but I know Utah, like that's the next step, is you start to look like, hey, what units are available with this tag, right? And again, I don't remember the number, but I'd say probably somewhere between 7 and 15 in Utah. There's a good amount. You've got some to choose from. And so I went on, I don't even remember what site I went on to look this up, but I was looking at the harvest data. It may have been Utah itself. But I started looking at the historical harvest data, which general units had the highest number of hunters, which ones had the highest number of, elk harvested. And it just so happened that the top 2 units for number of elk harvested also had the most hunters.
Go figure.
Go figure, right? And they were, generally speaking, the largest in area. And they were, well, I'll leave that part out. They looked elky.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, we'll say that. Even at first glance.
Yeah.
And so I knew, hey, if we're going to do this, we want to go where there are at least the best numbers of elk.
Yeah.
And I'm going to say that relatively because once we got into this unit, elk density was really low, which is why you couldn't take a cow. Right, it's an any bull unit. There were no cow tags available in that unit. Okay, well that kind of
any bull including spikes or branch antler?
Yes, spikes were legal, and so that also was that was useful information because we knew going in, it's any bull, it's a rifle, spikes are legal. Like literally any bull we see, first bull we see, one of us is taking a shot.
Yeah.
Like we're not passing any bulls.
Right.
Like it's not a trophy unit. If we see a big one, great.
Yeah.
We're shooting any bull.
Yeah.
Like we're there, to fill tags, get some meat. And so, okay, so back to, planning where in the state we're going to go. The 2 units with the most harvests were actually next to each other.
Oh, okay.
So we said, okay, that's probably an area we want to focus on these
Yeah.
2 units, this area of the state, right? So we start looking at that and immediately realized that there are parts of that unit that are heavily roaded. And then there are parts of that unit that are wilderness. So you start thinking with what you and I know, and Livesay talks about this in the e-scouting course, you're doing evaluations of zones of pressure, right? And so look, when it gets to rifle season, when it's an over-the-counter general tag, you're going to have a lot more road hunters.
Yeah,
right.
For sure.
So if we wanted to go where the elk were, get away from people, it became pretty clear to us that we wanted to be in an area where there were almost no roads or no motorized vehicles.
Yeah.
Right. And so,
quick tip: if you go to Onyx Hunt app, they have a layer that's a roadless that highlights areas that are a certain distance from roads. So that can be helpful too.
It was very helpful. And yeah, so I use Onyx as well, and so does my hunting partner. And so, that's really cool for me to be able to e-scout at home. I'm in Virginia, he's in Oregon.
Yep.
We're planning this all summer long, and I'm able to pick waypoints. I can text it to him, he can pull it up, it pops up in his Onyx, and I'm like, hey, and so he actually has a buddy whose dad had hunted that unit years ago.
Okay.
I don't know how long, somewhat recently, but not last year.
Yeah.
Right? And what's crazy is like the day before we go on the hunt, he just randomly asked the guy, like, hey, what do you know? And he was like, my dad killed a bull up there. I'll send you a waypoint for like where the bull went down. So he sends my buddy Zach the waypoint, and it's literally like 1.5 miles away from the tent waypoint that I set up is like where we're gonna sleep on night 1.
Nice, dude.
So we're like, okay, we got a good plan.
Yeah.
Right. And so
anytime you have like converging information, that's always a good confirmation.
Yeah. And so to me, like,
that was the same thing. Like for just jumping real quick on my hunt in New Mexico, I had like I can go into a little more, but I had scoured the unit and put pins like check this out because we got there 2 days early to scout.
Yep.
And like as we were looking at it, Kobe's like, this looks like a pretty good area, and it was like right where I dropped the pin, and I was like, yeah. So yeah, and you gotta have like converging information like that is good.
Absolutely. And that's where I'll do for the e-scouting, I'll do like an immediate one, like as soon as I know I'm going there, and then I kind of step away from it. I'll come back in a couple of weeks, and it kind of go through that through the summer, and then I start to narrow it down, and whatever is still left has made it through like 1, 2, 3 passes.
But when you had found that tent waypoint you dropped, what were the things that made you pick that spot?
Yeah, so I think this is a lot of what I've learned from Brian Barney, from hunting with Mike, and also from Mark with the e-scouting course, which I can't recommend that enough. If you're an East Coast guy, or if you're hunting in an area where you can't get there and scout in person, his course is invaluable. This was the second hunt where I've gone into a state and a unit that I've never seen before, and with his information, day one we're in elk.
Nice.
And so, what made that stand out was, the biggest thing was the gross area, the general area, being away from roads and pressure.
Okay. So you guys were backcountry. You were kind of.
We were. So we were that first camp spot was 5 miles from the trailhead.
Nice. So you guys are in there.
Yeah, so we got in, the season started on Saturday.
How many days of food did you bring?
We got in on Friday, we hiked in Friday afternoon, and we took food to get us through Monday, because we didn't want to commit the entire week to that spot.
That is a really good point. Like, if you're going in blind, you don't put everything in one basket.
Yep.
You start kind of, like, even 5 miles, that's a pretty good chunk to go straight in. You probably had some reasoning behind that, but that is one thing I've learned a lot. I think a lot of times guys like us have a tendency to be like, all right, this is where I'm going. I scouted it. We're bombing in. We're staying there 10 days. Yeah. And sometimes that can pay off, but a lot of times the more I've been around, the more I realize you need to go into the loose plan.
Yep.
And several backups. Yep. And then kind of start at 10,000 view and kind of work down closer and tighter.
And that's one of the things I learned from Brian Barney over the last couple of years. I've had the opportunity to hunt with him 2 different times. And his strategy, at least when I've been with him, is to cover ground however you can, whether that's, if it's roads and vehicles,
sometimes it means driving around a lot.
E-bikes, if it's hiking, whatever it is.
Yeah.
First priority is find the elk.
Yeah.
Right. And so if you're in an opportunity or in a unit like where we were, and you've got to hike in 5 miles to just check an area, you have to be ready. And we even talked about this. We're like, hey, if we don't see an elk by Sunday, we're out of here, so that we can go, because as we're e-scouting, we're identifying, like you said, multiple spots in this unit that we wanted to check out. This just so happened to be, like, of the 3 or 4 spots, this was the one that looked like the best place to start.
Yeah.
And if they weren't there, we were going to go to spot 2, spot 3, spot 4. And again, that's in the tree line e-scouting course as well, right?
And what kind of elevation game are you looking at going in?
Oh, man. I'm laughing because, so I woke up that Friday morning at like 3:30 in the morning here, flew out of Dulles.
Oh my gosh.
And, where our elevation is like 600 feet or something, if that. Ended up sleeping at 11,000 feet that night.
Oh my gosh. What was the trailhead at?
I don't remember. It was like 9 or something. Like we gained.
You did 2,000 feet.
We gained a pretty good amount. Like it wasn't a horrible hike. Like the hike in was all on a trail. It wasn't horrible. But when you're packing camp in, it's about a 50, 55 pound pack and a couple of miles and gaining.
If you're not very well prepared, it will be horrible.
Oh yeah. So
if you're prepared, like we train and stuff, it's not horrible, but for a lot of people, it's freaking horrible.
Thank goodness. Me and my buddy are like we're savvy enough to stay out of trouble in situations like that, right? We'll put it that way. But we barely got to that spot before we ran out of daylight. Barely had enough time to set up camp. And what we learned that first night is up there, because we're at that altitude. I mean, we were hiking in short sleeves and sweating, and it went from 55 and comfortable to seeing your breath. And by the time our tent was set up, it instantly had frost and ice on the outside of it. It went 55 and sweating to ice and freezing in a matter of 20 minutes.
And things can change quick too.
Yeah, and so I mean, thankfully, we immediately stripped off what we hiked in, put on dry clothes, layered up. A lot of people could have been dealing with hypothermia or elevation, altitude sickness, whatever. And so
here's another thing too that I learned is if you can, camp somewhere not too far from like where you can glass. You got to be careful, but and I ran this a little bit on my general rifle tag in Montana this year. We were about, I don't know, 1,300 foot climb from our glassing spot from our camp. Okay. So that's waking up every single day and climbing a mountain. By Virginia standards, a mountain. Right. Right. And so it was fine, but it wasn't terrible. But like by like 3 or 4 days in a row of doing that, it's like,
you don't have to. It's nice.
Yeah, don't do that. So anyway, so you get up there, and I do want to ask you. Well, real quick. I don't. Okay, go ahead.
Real quick. That's exactly why we picked that spot, and we actually, because it got dark, we didn't get exactly where we were aiming.
Okay.
But we were close enough, and we made it work. But we chose that spot because we felt like if there was hunting pressure down below and near the trailhead and in some of the lower elevation areas, if there were shots opening morning, that it would push elk up into, we'll call it roadless areas.
Yeah. So this is the day before the opener you got in there? Or?
Yeah, we were, so our idea was if people are shooting opening morning, we're already up here where the elk are gonna get pushed.
Yep.
And that was our strategy. And yeah, to your point, we were hoping to be at a spot where we could glass maybe from camp opening morning. It didn't work out, and most of that is because, as I told you before we hit record, this unit ended up being one that was really challenging to glass. Yeah. It just, the terrain didn't favor or set up well for that. There was one spot we would have been on it, but ended up not needing to be.
Okay, a couple of things. Did you pack water up there?
Yes.
Okay, so that's another thing that for some reason in my beginning stages didn't really ever factor in, but yeah, you either have to find a place near a spring, and sometimes there's springs on maps that aren't there. I will call the biologist and be like, is there water in the spring?
Yeah.
And sometimes they don't even know, but you can get yourself in trouble, so make sure you have water in mind, and you may have to pack it in.
We packed in enough for the first 12 to 24 hours, and then we knew, like when you looked at this area on OnX, another tip is if you just put the pure topo layer on OnX, you can see water features a lot more easily than either the hybrid or the satellite. And there's water everywhere. So we knew we weren't gonna have a problem finding water. And actually, the meadows in this unit, every meadow was a marsh.
Oh, wow.
Which made the whole thing way more interesting.
Did you see any moose?
Actually, we did.
Okay.
So close that we were actually yelling, "Hey, moose!" I'll show you a video. The day that I killed my elk, 10 o'clock in the morning, we had a moose come into that same meadow, and it circles the entire meadow. Basically, does like a number 6 around us. So it comes all the way in front of us horizontally, circles around, and comes in behind us. Had no idea we were there. We were kind of on a water hole in the middle of this meadow. It had like a little patch of trees.
Yeah.
And he ended up, this was a huge moose. I don't know for a fact if they have Shiras moose there or not, but if it was, it's the biggest, biggest Shiras moose I've ever seen. And I actually helped Brian look for his last year, so I've seen quite a few that didn't make his cut.
Yeah.
This was a big Shiras moose. And it was like 20 yards away from us. And my buddy was like, dude, we got to yell so that it doesn't see us and
get freaked out.
Yeah, so like we had a joke of like, how many hey mooses does it take for this thing to go away? Because it got a little hairy for a minute.
Yeah, and they're dangerous. So did your hike in pay off and you got away from people?
Yes.
Okay.
So what was interesting is that as we set up camp, we had some horses come through, and these guys came over and they're like, what are y'all doing up here? Like, what do you mean? What are we doing? We're up here hunting. And they're like, where's your horses? We're like, well, we don't have horses. Like, y'all hiked in? Yeah, we hiked in. Like, apparently, so the guys we met, it's a family. They had like 12 people in this huge wall tent that was about 1.5 miles below us. We came in further than they were. They had 12 horses, whole family, wall tent. They've been hunting this drainage for like 15 years.
Wow.
And they actually had archery tags. We found this out later, that entire archery season they were up there, and there were no bugling.
Wow.
No bugles. None of them got a bull. And as I was telling you, if they're not bugling, this would be a really, really hard unit to hunt. And so we were fortunate that they did start bugling when we were there. And so that was Friday night, we're having that conversation with them. And then we saw them again Saturday evening. They rode through the meadow that we were hunting. And, the guy's like, hey, are you Virginia and Oregon? And he hadn't learned our names yet. He just remembered where we were from. And we were like, yeah. And he's like, y'all are in a good spot, and check this out. And it's like, cool. If you guys get one down, here's this is where our tent is, and let us know, and we'll help you pack it out. And
nice.
We're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing.
That's amazing. Which reminds me of a side tip. Okay, I always do this whenever you're out there. Don't try to be like macho or whatever. When you see people, stop and talk to them, even if they don't seem very nice at first. Mm-hmm. Be respectful and talk, because you never know what could happen. Like, they could give you a spot. They could end up helping you out. Yeah. Like, I always stop and talk to people, especially if I can tell they're locals. Yeah. And that very often will lead to good things.
Okay, so just to prove that point for you, these people were some of the nicest people you could ever imagine. So, I got my bull on Sunday evening. Monday, we met up with them, and they convinced us, because we only had enough food to get through Monday, right? So we had to hike out. So we're hiking out Monday afternoon, and on the way to, the trailhead, we stopped by their camp. And somehow, I'll try to condense this, but we ended up, we hit it off. They invited us. He's like, man, we never tell anybody where our camp is. We never invite anybody to our camp. We want you guys to sleep here with us tonight. So we ended up sleeping in their wall tent on cots with a wood stove. Nice. Now, it was so cold at night, like the previous night, remember it was a marsh, so like our bootlaces are wet. My buddy's got a picture. His bootlace is frozen, like a foot high,
so it was like
straight
legit
up.
Cold, yeah.
Right. And so we got to sleep in a wall tent Monday night. So we ended up, we hiked all the way out to the truck. We reloaded with food, got more water, changed gear and whatever, came back in. We slept at their place Monday night, and they told us about another meadow where they had been hearing bugles a couple of days before, but then they shut up and nothing. Mm-hmm. And so we were like, so Tuesday we ended up, that's where Zach and I hunted, in that particular meadow, which was less than a mile from where we slept Monday night. And so he ended up getting his bull there Tuesday evening, and that played out almost the same. But check this out. They had to leave. Some of them had to leave on Monday or Tuesday. They had to leave and go home. And there was somebody in archery season had lost a horse. And we happened to find it.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, there was like on some of the trail signs, there was a wanted sign. Wow. It was like, have you seen this horse? And we happened to stumble on it on Sunday. And so we were telling them, and they're like, oh, we know the people that own it. Somebody had rented that horse.
And lost it.
And they knew the owners. So they grabbed the horse and were taking it back to the owners on Tuesday. And the taxidermist that they recommended that we use happened to be there. And they're like, oh, we'll take your bull to the taxidermist for you if you want, to save you a trip. So they ended up taking my bull to the taxidermist for me.
That's awesome.
And then on Wednesday, after Zach got his bull, they helped us pack his out on their horses.
That's amazing.
Just all because we met these people. All
because you talked to people, yeah. So a couple things, going from no elevation to tons. I don't want to go into it because we got too much to talk about. But on your YouTube channel, there's training tips for guys. There's breathing exercises and stuff you can do.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I was going to say it. I'll just share that video with you. You put it in the show notes, whatever, if people want it. But part of what I'm obsessed with in terms of performance is understanding breathing. And you can absolutely do these breathing techniques. Mm-hmm. I do them every other day for a week before I go out west. And I have zero problem with elevation.
Yep. I tried some of them before I hunted in New Mexico the first time with Dan. We were camped at 10,000 and going up to 11. And the locals were like, oh, you're going to have problems. And I was like, no, I'm not. And I didn't. And so those exercises absolutely work. And then also I use a product, I can't swear by the efficacy, but I use it and I think it does help. Mountain Ops makes a product called Solitude. It's just an herbal supplement. I'm not exactly sure what it is, but you start taking it a few days before. I think that helped me out too. But anyway, okay, so you're in your all's first spot, and I'm assuming you didn't find any elk there, and then
We did.
You did. Okay.
Yeah. So, well, from where we camped in the same spot Friday, Saturday, Sunday night. So Saturday we hunted a couple of different meadows, a couple of different areas. Didn't see or hear anything. Heard a bunch of shots opening morning, and it turns out it was the people we met. 2 of their wives got small bulls.
Nice.
We found that out later. And then Sunday, we went to another meadow in the opposite direction and get there right around daybreak. We're a little bit later than we wanted to be. And it's almost like the shape of a T meadow, except imagine if the T wasn't intersecting like halfway through. It was more like 30-70, right? Mm-hmm. So it's 600 yards across from where we enter this meadow. And we just, as soon as we get in there, we're standing there for a few minutes trying to figure out what we want to do. And all of a sudden I'm like, dude, there's an elk. And this cow had come out of the woods, gotten spooked, ran halfway out, kind of stopped, and then just started slow rolling across. And from where we were standing, she was like 330 or 350. It would have been a poke if it had been a bull.
Yeah.
So we were like, hey, there's water in the middle of this thing. And so we worked our way to the water. And like I said, there was a stand of trees there. And so, we worked our way there. And that put us pretty much in the middle of that meadow. And we were able to see somewhat down that leg of the T, and then the entire, kind of horizontal section to one end, to the far end. At that point, it was 400 yards. And then back to where we came in was like 220.
Yeah.
Right. And so at least from there, we could cover as much of that meadow as possible. And we were like, hey, we're just going to stay here, see what happens. And a couple hours later, that moose came out. And so we had that encounter, and we're like, this is a pretty good spot. And we heard a couple of faint bugles. There's wooded area that dropped down on one side, and so went down. And then there's a big, steep incline that was wooded, north facing, on the top side of this meadow. And right at the top of that, there's this rock outcropping. And that's actually really close to that one spot that I said would be a vantage point. And that's where we had initially said we were going to camp. We just didn't get there Friday night before dark. And
north-facing slopes tend to be stuff you should look out for with elk.
Absolutely. That's a prime bedding spot. And if you can, when you're on OnX, if you can find where those topo lines get wider, you're going to see benches, right?
Yeah.
And so that's a feature that, again, I've learned that from Brian and Mark on the e-scouting course. That's prime habitat.
Yeah.
And so we happened to be in a meadow that had that exact feature above and below.
Cool.
And all through the morning, we were hearing faint bugles from a couple of different places. Somewhere around, it was between noon and 2. I don't remember exactly when, but we looked up on that rocky outcropping, and there were 3 bulls working their way around. And we only saw their like backsides and kind of the tips of their antlers, but you could tell they were bulls. And we're like, okay. And so, we said, we're just going to stay in this spot.
Yeah.
And so I'm now referring to my buddy Zach as the elk whisperer, because he called in both of our bulls.
Yeah.
And I think, to his credit, he really understands how to be patient and not lose the elk.
Yeah.
Right.
And you come from hunting with Brian, who's not a caller. He's just straight up spot.
Yeah. And so the whole time, every time Zach's like, I think I want to call. I'm like, I don't want to. I don't think so. Because like with Brian, it's one, he's a bow hunter, right?
Yeah.
And that makes a difference. But his whole thing is, don't let them know you're hunting them.
Right.
Right. And as long as you don't make that mistake, because remember, priority number 1 is find the elk.
Yeah.
And so if you make a mistake calling and you blow them out, now you're back to, well, shit, now I got to find elk again.
Yeah.
Right. And so with his strategy.
Yeah. That's how Kobe is too. He's very much like, just don't announce your presence, be sneaky.
Yeah.
And where we were, there's freaking elk everywhere bugling their faces off, so it didn't need to.
Right. Another thing that I've learned from Brian that my buddy Zach understands is, to be an effective hunter, we have to understand, elk movement and what they're doing, right? And so in the morning, if you do see them in the morning, they're typically going somewhere. They're not really milling around and hanging out like they might be in the evening, right? And so in the morning, even though we heard a couple of calls, we knew that the chances of us calling them out were slim to none.
Yeah.
Right. Especially once they were already in the timber.
Are you hearing them bugle at this time or no? Or like faint?
In the morning, we heard a few. Like
Yeah.
like after we saw that cow, and through the day, you'd hear it like every once in a while. Like I'd say maybe every hour and a half. It's like, oh, did you hear that?
Yeah.
Did you hear that?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
yeah. It's not like they're screaming or running around or rutting, whatever. But like it's more of like they're like locating each other, and so that's where Zach understands. Like, hey. They're just kind of making sure, hey, are you still over there? Are you still here? And so he's playing that game, and it's just a one location bugle, not to try to get them to come to us, but to just say, we're still here, you stay there, right?
Is he from Oregon, your buddy?
Yeah.
Okay.
Washington, Oregon. He's going to kick me in the knee for not knowing this. He's in Washington now, but he's from Oregon. Yeah, so he grew up hunting Rosies.
Another good example of, dude, the Pacific Northwest produces killer hunters.
Yes, and so he had to learn how to call because that's a call-heavy hunt.
Right.
And so I think that was one of the things that we did really well. And again, like another thing from Brian, patience kills the bull, right? And so for us, not pressuring them, not over calling, but just saying, hey, we know there's a bull there. If we're patient to just stay in this meadow until the evening, it'll probably come out.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's the hardest part. And so midday, I go and find, like, I know where there's water between where we're hunting and where our camp is. So I go find water, you lay down, you take a nap, whatever. And, as it gets closer to like 2:30, 3, they start sounding off a little bit more, and you're just playing that game. Hey, he bugles back. Hey, we're still here. And, we're starting to try to figure out like which one do we think is going to come out.
Is your buddy initiating the bugling, or are you waiting to hear something and then he'll bugle back?
A little bit of both, where it's like, if it's been an hour and a half or 2 hours and he hasn't heard anything, he's like, I'm going to rip one and just see what happens. And then he'll bugle back, and he's like, okay. And then so he waits, 20 or 30, and then it's bugle back. And so that's where, like, to your question, where like I'm so used to Brian who doesn't call.
Yeah.
I'm going to err on the side of not calling. So every time he's like, I want to do this, I'm like,
So he was bugling and they were like bed bugling back to him.
Basically, that's what it is.
Yeah.
Like, and he's doing basically bed bugling too, right? And so we're starting to try to, figure out, like, we're getting in position, we've got our shooting sticks because we're not in a position where we can get prone, but we're testing all that. We're saying like, hey, if I get prone, is grass in the way? No.
That's so important to do because a lot of people, myself included, you'll kind of, okay, I found the spot, I'm here, I'm ready to go. But then you it's almost like you don't realize, like, okay, I got to actually get down and shoot this animal. So this is a mistake I made on my elk hunt. There was a outcropping of rocks that was like probably 400 or 500 yards closer to the ridge they were on.
Yeah. And
it was like a good shooting spot, like where it was like flat because it was a rock outcropping. So I actually went down there. Of course, this is like day 3 or something, and like made a little, I set my rifle up, got it all. So if one popped out, I could jump on my rifle and be ready.
Yeah.
If I had done that day 1, I might have killed an elk, but I didn't. So that's a good point.
I learned that the hard way on a spring bear hunt with Brian and Mike.
I saw that video.
I got in a prone position on a rocky outcropping like that, and through my scope, I couldn't see a branch, but they could, and they're like, all right, this isn't going to work. You got to move. You got to do this.
You got to be ready.
Yeah.
Especially if you're like an ambush hunt like that.
Yeah. And that's a huge lesson for any hunter, especially if you're a new or beginning hunter, is you've got to think through where are these elk going to come from. And for me as an archery hunter, that's one of those things where, like, when you get in the stand, where are my shooting lanes? What are my distances?
Because you're going to be stressed mentally when they come out, big time.
And I'm, like I said, I most of my hunting is archery and whitetail. And so it's very hard when a whitetail is within 30 yards to be able to get a rangefinder up, get a range, draw, do all that.
You got to know ahead of time.
Yeah, and so I'm very much used to that. And so, I've ranged all the trees. I know, there's 5 different places an elk could have come out. I knew all the ranges, and we're all set up.
That's smart, man. I need to do a better job of that. That's smart.
I think it was around 4 o'clock. We had a cow and a calf come out, and they were at like 350, 400 in the very back edge. And that actually really helped. We weren't going to take a shot, but it helped us kind of, like, we got the tripod set up, and
what cartridge are you shooting?
This is my 280 Ackley.
Ooh, I've heard good things about that cartridge.
Dude, it put 2 elk down in 2 shots.
Well, that's good. And I know how tough those stinkers are. So
It's actually I hit mine twice, so I'd take that back. But I'll get to that. But it allowed me to, again, in that testing and prep, like I found a spot where like, okay, I'm seated, I have the tripod as shooting stick with 3 legs, and I'm up high enough to where I can clear all the brush, but I'm also low enough to be stable and feel comfortable at that range. And so a little while later. Do you
practice shooting seated like that?
Not enough.
Me either.
I actually do dry fire drills. And so I got this from a sniper a few years ago. There's 2 different drills. One, you put the reticle on whatever your target would be, and you squeeze the trigger.
See if it moves.
And try to not have the reticle move, right? And then the second progression of that is to actually put a nickel on the barrel, standing up. Which I can't.
Your back into it? You're saying?
No, just like in a shooting position, could you pull a trigger with a nickel standing on the barrel?
Resting on your rifle.
Yeah. I can't get it to do that whether I'm shooting it or not.
Yeah, like if I touch the thing, it's going to move.
Right. But that starts to show you, if you're going to shoot somebody.
I like the first one. Let's stick with that one.
It's a progression.
Yeah.
Right? And again, like we're talking about a military sniper who's maybe taking a 1 mile shot. Like,
yeah, and it's a lot higher stakes. It's people.
Sure.
In war. But, yeah, what was I going to say? I lost my train of
practicing. So I'll do the dry firing drill, and I do... so we have a lot of deer at our property, and we actually have cows that are across the street at like 400 and 500 yards. And so I may or may not aim at them and do dry firing drills.
Yeah, dude, you gotta do it sometimes. I mean, what I was gonna say there, I forgot though, is like, I feel like somehow I shoot better on animals than like targets or steel.
Yeah.
Like
there's something
rarely miss an animal. It's almost like
it's like
you get to like a flow state or something.
Yeah, you're a gamer, right? So like,
I'm not saying that. I'm just saying like,
think about how athletes.
Have you ever thought about it's like a flow state?
Like you need stakes, right? There's higher stakes, so you're going to
perform to that level,
right? Some people would wilt in that situation. Other people, it heightens their focus.
Nice.
So that's what I said. You're a gamer. There's some people that are better in games than in practice, right? So you're a gamer.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah. So.
Thank you.
A few minutes after we saw the, I have to look at my phone for the exact time, but it was probably like 6:30.
Okay.
So back up, like after we saw
the bull and the cow step out. I mean, the cow and the calf.
Yeah. So after that, like this bull starts sounding off a little bit more, and so there's actually 3 that are talking. One
in the thick around.
Yeah, one below in the thick, one on the far side in the thick, and then one up above us.
You're sitting pretty right now.
We knew one of them at least was going to come out.
Is this the only meadow in like a pretty large area, or are there multiple options they can hit?
There are multiple options, but we felt like if we were bugling that. We were kind of triangulating and kind of trying to bring them to us.
About how far from a trail or road were you?
I'd say the closest trail was near our tent, and that would have been about a mile and a quarter.
Okay, so you're in there a little bit off the beaten path of anything.
Yeah,
yep.
Yeah. And again, the only people back there are people with horses.
Yeah.
Like there's not a lot of foot traffic. Right. It's the only other people in that area were the people that we saw with the horses in the tent. And they weren't hunting in that area that day. And again, that's why we chose that area. We knew we were going to have to get away from pressure.
Yeah, of course.
And so...
sorry I keep interrupting you. I just want to get the whole detail.
You're good. So Zach starts, he's kind of escalating, right? And as the day... the afternoon starts to turn into evening and it starts to get closer to dark. All the bulls are starting to get a little bit more aggressive with their calls. He's slowly amping it up and it gets to the point.
Getting more excited?
I am. It gets to the point where like they're kind of screaming at each other back and forth. And it's like, holy shit, like, this is cool. And like, he's loving it because he loves talking to him. And all of a sudden he saw it first and he's like, dude, there's an elk. And so my bull comes out, kind of almost in like the top part of like where the T would be coming up. And so he's kind of coming on a diagonal, but man, he's on a straight line for where we are. And
which I've seen the video, guys. Did you post it yet?
I haven't.
Okay. You will, I'm sure, right?
I don't know if I will just because of like Zach's all over the place. So he's not a professional cameraman.
Whatever.
He's calling, he's ranging, he's looking through binoculars and he's forgetting
that probably get more views than my stuff on YouTube.
He's also holding his phone. And so like there are times in the video where all you see are like the sky and the top of the trees.
Who cares, dude?
And so I'm to his left, and at one point, this is so cool. I thought about this last night when I was thinking about, our podcast. At one point that day when we were sitting in the field, I was like, man, I can't wait to see a bull bugle through my scope. Mm-hmm. And as he's walking out, when he first came out, he's straight on. And we'd already seen a moose. And the dark side of him was to us, and I couldn't see the lighter color. Mm-hmm. I was like, man, that's not an elk. That's another moose. Mm-hmm. And then he took a couple steps, and I could see his midsection and his rump. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's a bull. And he's so wide, man. You can see his width.
Did you get to see him bugle?
Yeah. Okay. So I get him in the scope, and Zach's ranging him. He's at 300, just wait. And so somewhere between him being at 300 and when I took the shot,
he's just walking at you.
He's walking straight at us.
Okay.
And then just with the terrain, somewhere around 280, 300, it kind of goes back and forth. Because at one point, Zach calls out 280. And then when I shot him, he was a little further at 300. He was right at 300 when I shot him.
Now, here's a question for you. If he was walking on a string, why did you wait to get a little closer? Why you just felt like it was the time?
Well, at that distance, I wasn't going to take a frontal shot at 300 or 350. And I just knew he was showing no signs of stopping. I knew he was going to come closer. And again, it's rifle. He's in the scope.
So you just, when the moment felt right, you pulled the trigger? Yeah.
I'm just watching him. As soon as he was in the meadow, I knew I had a shot. It was just...
You felt confident at 3, and then you just took it there.
Yeah. So, he was broadside, and he stopped long enough to where it wasn't a moving target.
So he had stopped walking straight at you at the point when you shot?
Yeah, so he's walking straight at us. He rips a bugle, and I get to watch that through the scope,
Nice.
Which is awesome. You can hear it on the video, but you can't see him because Zach's looking at the sky. Okay. And so after that, he kind of turns, and he's walking left to right, and it, a few seconds later, he stops, and he's broadside, and I hit him.
Nice, dude.
And so what's funny is, he doesn't even flinch, and Zach's miss. And I chamber another round, and I'm looking at him, and all of a sudden I can start to see blood spreading.
Oh, geez.
And I'm like, no, that was a heart shot. He just wasn't even moving. And so
it's wild how they can do that, isn't it?
I just put another one in him just because I'm not going to.
With elk, you don't stop shooting until they're done on the ground.
Right. And so then, the second one hits him, and he takes a couple of steps. He moves off a little bit and then just piles up a couple of seconds later. And you've seen that video, and it's just, it's so cool.
Note. That's amazing, dude.
Yeah.
How'd you feel in that moment?
It was awesome. It was awesome. It was I never would have guessed it would have taken me 5 years of elk hunting to get my first elk. And that's not I've been at full draw on monsters.
Right.
One in Colorado, one in Montana. A lot of things have happened. I've been inside a bow range on.
But what was that emotion? Were you excited? Were you relieved, proud?
It was all of it. That's the cool thing about hunting is it's the spectrum of emotions that you feel at once. If somebody isn't a hunter, it's hard to explain how you can simultaneously feel all of those things. And so a big part of it for me was finally.
Yeah.
Because I've been so close so many times. And it was excitement, it was, happiness, it was relief, to get to do it with a friend, and he called it in, it's to hug him, and
very pure experience. You got the real deal elk hunt.
It was awesome. And so what's crazy is, a week before, Zach texted me and he was like, my grandfather, passed away on 10/10.
No way.
I'm gonna kill my elk on 10/10. And I was like, let's make it so. And we have a screenshot of that. And so I killed mine on Sunday the 8th. He killed his on Tuesday the 10th.
No way.
Yeah. And so his, 2 days later, almost the exact same thing. We picked a meadow. We show up there in the morning. We don't see anything, but we hear a couple of faint bugles. And we just say, hey, we're gonna...
Wait, hold on. You can't go under your buddy's kill yet. The other thing I was going to say about that emotion, too, is, like I said, you got to put pure experience. I mean, it's like a picture-perfect kind of elk hunt. But also, knowing, hey, I found this spot on a computer from Virginia.
It's pretty cool.
And we walked in here and did it.
Yeah.
That, for me, is a huge, that's...
It is, but it's so this is something I learned last year. I went to Montana last year, and I'd say I got to hunt with Brian for a couple of days. and I got to hunt one day with Mike. But for the most part, I was hunting by myself.
Yeah.
And like you, I work from home. I work by myself. Unlike you, there's nobody in my house when I'm working. Like I basically,
it can be lonely.
I basically spend all day at home by myself. When I hunt, I don't want to do it by myself.
Yeah.
I want to share it with my friends. I want to share it with Mike or Zach or Brian or you.
Yeah.
And I think this is a whole other conversation, right? How do you find the right hunting partner? But
A great conversation, by the way.
it would be a great conversation, right? And so a big part of hunting for me is the shared experience.
100%,
right?
man.
And so to be able
I'm not
to
a big
do it,
solo hunter guy.
yeah. And so to be able to do it with Zach, and then like you said, like, yeah, I found that spot, but my mind immediately goes to, I can't wait to tell Brian,
Exactly,
hey,
yeah.
all that stuff you told me, like I used this, I
Tribe.
thought about this, I did this, right?
From your book, Tribe.
Yeah. And
That's part of the...
and like with Mark, like I sent him that message. I was, man, I should have sent you this earlier. But you know, the stuff that you teach, like I did this, and it's like, yeah, I did it, but like it's not like,
Well, yeah. We have good resources these days, but you still did it. I wouldn't try to detract from that.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's tons of great resources out there, but man, like you did it. But what you're gonna say about partner, so when I drew this New Mexico tag, obviously for what I'm doing, I bring a photographer along. Sure. Most of my hunts are just me and the photographer, 90% of the time. In some situations, like with Luke, we're friends and he's my photographer. And I'm friends with all of them, but sometimes, a lot of times it's, hey, nice to meet you. Let's spend 9 days together.
Yeah.
So, but...
You learn a lot about somebody in those 9 days.
Oh, yeah, dude. Like, me and Kobe or Logan or any of my other camera guys, like, and even with Dan, like Dan Staten, I feel like brothers. Like, we don't talk that often, but, like, we can pick it up right where we left off. And, like, you know, just 'cause we spent 9 days together grinding on elk hunt.
Right.
But what I was going to say was, I was like, I drew this awesome tag, and I was like, I felt this pressure, like, man, should I invite, like, some, you know, industry friend of mine who's some killer elk hunter? Like, even, should I, like, find someone to help me spot? You know, like, I even had the temptation of, should you get a guide to help you? Because in this unit, you know, you can legit kill 360s or better. I
remember when you drew the tag, we were talking about it, because I was asking you, like, who's going to go with you, who's filming,
But I just had this, I just got off an unsuccessful bear hunt where I was just stressing too much and not enjoying the experience. And I was like, you know what, dude? Like, I'm not going to try to invite some industry person or whatever, or a guide or whatever. Like, I'm going to invite my cousin from Virginia, who's actually, correction, he has been along on another elk hunt. His dad do the Kentucky elk tag.
Okay.
They're from Kentucky. Anyway, but that being aside, he is, you know, less experienced than me, and a great dude, but casual hunter, you know, at best. Maybe goes once or twice a year here in Virginia or something, maybe. So anyway, it was just fun having him along. Just like, I wanted to kind of ground me and just like have like fun and make it just like a family thing, but much more rewarding, and like having him there to help me pack the thing out.
Yeah.
And I mean, he's going straight from a desk job, so but he's tough. He kept up pretty good, but you know, by the end of it, he was a little worn, but he packed out a whole hind, I think. And anyway, don't want to go too deep down that rabbit trail, but it is definitely nice sharing it with like a friend, family member, etc.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so that's where, like I said, I'm trying to jump ahead to Tuesday because I want to make sure we talk about
10-10.
Yeah. So Zach, he ended up getting his bull on 10-10, which was that's just cool in itself. But the other part that makes this relevant and maybe helpful for the listeners is that we basically ran the exact same play.
Same meadow?
It was a different meadow.
Okay.
And so this was, you know, Monday we started, you know, taking care of mine. We hiked back out. We
pack it all the way back to your car, 5 miles or whatever?
So I don't know if I told you this, because some people I've told, some people I haven't. I got no meat off of my elk.
How?
I haven't told you this. My elk had sarcocystosis.
The little white things? And so that ruins all the meat?
It is a protozoan parasite. And
so it's just not worth the risk?
I chose to heed the advice that's on their website of not eating it.
All right, well, I'm going to give you some of my elk before you leave.
No,
Remind me.
No, you're not.
Yes, I am.
So,
I'm making a note.
So here's the thing. What we've learned since then, so we tried to call the game department on that Monday morning, but it turns out that was Columbus Day, so they were closed. So we couldn't get a hold of anybody. And what we found out since then is that it's actually a lot more prevalent than most people realize. We've probably consumed game meat with it. It's just never been that obvious to me. My like when you butcher an elk or a deer, it's real dark red.
Yeah.
Right. This was like pale red. I'll show you pictures.
Weird.
All of the meat was a different color red, and the white. It looks like grains of rice was just so prevalent. It just looked disgusting.
Yeah.
No.
Do you have to pack it out still, or
no outward signs on the bull? Like you couldn't tell. No. Again, like some people would say, like you take it to a dump. But like I wasn't gonna pack it out 5 miles and throw it away. So
I'd rather let like animals and stuff just eat it.
well, and so that was the thought. But then it's like, well, if a coyote consumes that, then they're gonna excrete it,
Oh, God,
and then
what'd you do?
it's gonna be back in the food supply. And so that's why it becomes so prevalent, right? It's like once it's in the food chain, it's hard to get rid of it.
So what'd you do?
Left it.
Yeah.
And so we made that call on Monday.
That sucks, man. That's like half the thing.
But here's the thing. So
I'm definitely giving you some for you.
if you freeze meat below 4 degrees Celsius, -4 Celsius, which is like, -4 Fahrenheit, which is -20 Celsius.
Okay.
That will kill it.
My freezers are down there, I think.
Yep, that will kill it. So our freezer right now is set at 0. So if I wanted to, I would just drop it to 4.
I have this app on my phone that is connected to these like
Smart
sensors
freezer?
in my
Yep.
freezer. So if it ever goes out, it sends me a notification.
Dude.
It's just something I got off Amazon, but
I've had a freezer die
I've had a buddy who had
with a
I'm
lot
at
of deer meat in it.
-3.8 at one and 6 in the other.
Okay. So your -3.8 is going to kill the sarcocystosis. Or you cook it to 160 or higher temperature.
Which you don't really want to do with wild game meat.
Unless you're going to can it like bear meat to get rid of trichinella, right?
I'm
So
gonna try that.
that's an option. But we didn't know all that, couldn't find it out. So
Just grab a sweater. Keep going.
yeah, so we did that. That was Monday. We met up with these guys. They told us about this meadow that was near their wall tent. So we went and hunted that meadow on Tuesday. Heard some bulls in the morning. Again, same thing as Sunday. Nothing crazy.
Yeah.
They were already past the meadow, right? So they're in the timber and they're only going higher. So we know there's no way we're going to get them to come back out, right? And so it's just, hey, rule number 1, find the elk. We found the elk.
Isn't that so disheartening when
Don't
you just hear
blow
them
out.
bugling away from you and they move
No.
really fast?
No, because we knew.
Oh, for me it was. When we were on stalks, I was like,
Yeah,
I was like,
you're on a
he's
stalk,
leaving.
If you're on a stalk, maybe so.
Because
But
I had to get in their bubble too. I'm open sight muzzy, so I'm
true.
like 100 is like pretty much a max.
yeah, well, he ended up shooting his at 77.
That's wild.
Yeah. So we just knew, like, hey, we found elk. We're just going to stay here. And so again, same play, like take a nap during the day, go get
And you
water,
just
hang
popped out,
out.
comes straight at you.
Same thing as the afternoon went on, you know, you're doing the bed bugling, you're staying in contact with them, you know, you're still there, I'm still here. As the evening progressed, it starts to heat up a little bit, and you know, we could tell he was coming towards us, and you know, we start getting excited, and he's starting to, you know, rip at it and, you know, get more aggressive, and you're like, dude, he's close. And I actually saw his first, and I saw him in the trees. I was like, dude, there he is, he's coming out. And so like the video I sent you was his.
Oh, okay.
And we had already ranged all of those trees, and I knew like this tree that he was getting ready to come out from was 125 yards, and I'm able to tell him, you know, hey, you know, he's 125.
Just like close enough for a running shot.
And, yeah, and again, he's on a string, frontal straight at us, and so he's just watching through the scope, waiting on him to turn broadside, and he did. And, you know,
Nice,
he
man.
pulled that Lampers, you know, the high double lung.
Okay,
not
that
waste
dropped him?
Not waste any meat. Hit him. He turned. He walked about 50 yards away. Zach cow calls to get him to stop. He looks back over his head. Tips over. Done.
Wow, man. So that's such a great story, dude. One thing I'll say is huge thing I learned this year, and you said it, or we said it. Don't stop shooting until the things drop. Normally, I mean, I think your friend did it right too. But like,
Yeah.
my elk, I shot him full frontal.
Okay.
He reared up on both back legs, hit the dirt, 80 yards. I saw like steam puff out of his chest from like when he exhaled.
And your muzzleloader was what, 50 cal?
It's a 50 cal. It's sitting right over there.
That's like a mini
with a
cannon.
big 250 grain Barnes. Which one's it? TTSX, I think.
Dude.
Anyway, straight up dead. And then I'm walking up on him. I see him breathing a little bit, and it was really thick all around us. Like if he took off and ran, you just never know.
Yeah.
So even though it was a good hit, I think it would have killed him. It just probably would have taken a couple out. I don't know. I hit him right in the vitals. Like there was no meat loss in the shoulders, so I know it went right between into the boiler. And anyway, I walk up on him. I step on a twig, and I'm ready. I'm reloaded. I gotta show you did I show you the video?
No.
Oh, dude, I gotta show you the video.
Okay.
He wriggles himself up, and like 30 yards, I basically practically shoot off the hip, just bang, and just drop him.
Jeez. It's amazing how tough and
They're
resilient
so tough,
all those
dude.
animals. I mean, even deer are the same way. I can't tell you.
My blacktail took 300 Win Mag shots.
It's ridiculous.
Did you see the reel of the shot?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
It hits him
you,
quartered
one went
away.
in the neck.
Okay, so the first shot, I got so much hate.
Because on the third one, he finally drops.
Yeah, I got so much hate on the comment section and from some people were like, "Nice shot, good job," and like some people gave me hate. But the first shot was far back, but he was heavily quartered. You can look in the Instagram post on the picture. You can see the entry, and it's money. It's should like most deer dropping. It's a deadly shot. Second one hits him right behind the shoulder. He just like a bull elk and just keeps walking.
Yeah,
like I couldn't believe. I still can't believe it. But I've watched it like a million times. It hits it right behind the shoulder, man. 300 Win Mag.
Yeah.
Third shot hit him like front a little bit too forward. It hit him in the neck, and he dropped.
Yeah.
But anyway, insanely tough. This was my longest shot ever. Sorry, I'm getting off track a little bit, but it was like 560 yards, so across the canyon. So I don't know if my bullets got the expansion they should have gotten at that range. I think I need to be shooting the Barnes LRX next year instead of the Vortex, because apparently past 400 they get better expansion. Anyway, don't stop till they're dead.
Yeah, I mean, even on deer, the first mule deer I shot was quartering a lot more to me than I realized. And I got, it went through the lung on the entry side. On the exit side, it actually shattered the offside hip joint. And that thing ran all the way down the hill on a shattered hip, and then a couple of hundred more yards in another direction.
Insane.
I've seen whitetail take a frontal shot that they're dead on their feet, but they still run. I've hit a whitetail in the heart, knocked it down, and it still gets up, jumps a fence, and runs 50 yards before it dies.
Yeah, but elk are a next level, dude.
Oh, sure. But I'm just saying, like any of those animals, man, they're just.
Yeah, that's true. But I still think elk are like. I don't know. Like I said, I was talking about blacktail deer.
Yeah.
So anyway, but I think blacktail are the toughest deer there are.
When you spend your whole life trying to not get killed or eaten, like you develop some pretty good, some pretty strong survival tendencies.
Yeah. So what cartridge you guys shoot? Or you said 28 Ackley improved.
Yep.
So, and what actual bullets are you shooting?
Hornaday, the ELDX.
Okay.
I believe it's 162 grain.
See, I stopped shooting the ELDX and went to a solid copper because I shot a deer with it was a 6.5 Creedmoor, but it was like 150, 120 yard shot. I was using ELDXs, very accurate bullets, but they expanded so quick. There was like very little penetration, and for some reason there was like no bullet trail. I found the deer, but ever since I switched to like a solid copper bullet, and this is not a commercial, guys. I'm totally like just being honest with you guys. Multiple different companies make solid copper bullets.
Sure.
And I'm not even talking about necessarily the ones I shoot, but solid copper, it just seems to perform really well. It keeps its weight. Like you can show you right there. Grab those bullets right there. If you're watching on YouTube, check this out. Grab the one next to it. That's the one that actually killed my elk. The big one. So it just retains its weight. The ELDX, in my opinion, although it does have good applications, not this one.
Oh.
This big fat 50 cal one. The ELDX just like exploded too much and it didn't get in there. So these things have been super deadly to me. Sorry, that was a rabbit trail.
And I have had instances where...
Look, there it is. That's the one that killed the elk.
Jeez. I have had instances where I've shot a deer with the 280 using that cartridge, and had no blood trail.
Yeah.
And it was a nice buck, and really the only reason I found it was I saw its antlers sticking out of the brush.
That's basically what happened with me with my deer too.
There's no
Actually,
blood
it's
trail.
this deer right here.
Oh wow.
This deer right here. If you're watching on YouTube, that's the one I'm talking about. Virginia Chesapeake deer.
Yeah, it would have been a shame not to find any animal.
Yeah, he's kind of funky looking too. He's kind of got this weird like.
I like that.
Brow tine that shoots straight at a right angle. Anyway.
Yeah, and I mean with my caliber, just because I mean 280 Ackley bullets are not super common. I have yet to find a copper one. If I could find a copper one, I'd shoot it. Especially because I'm so concerned with like the food that I eat.
Yeah, you don't want like fragments of heavy metals in your meat.
Yeah, it's not ideal.
Yeah, that's another great thing about copper.
Yeah,
everyone's like whining about. I know you don't want to restrict anything gun wise, but like everyone's whining about, oh, they're making the switch to all copper bullets. I did it on purpose, but
yeah.
Shout out to Ned, he got me onto the copper thing. But I've seen more animals drop dead like that with copper than anything else I've ever shot. Anyway. So you guys schwack your bulls. That's amazing. He did his on 10/10. He says grandfather passed away on that day.
Yep.
And the pack out. So you got some help with the horses, but I don't know. Anything else just about that whole like the feelings or anything?
I mean, again, just to be able to share that and to be able to do it with each other. Like we still text each other like, man, like, you know, can we go back out there? And like, you remember that time? It was like, yeah, like, it's like, think about it every day. And
awesome.
It's cool that we got both of those on video. I can't tell you how many times I watched the video. And, like,
Isn't that amazing having your adventures right there?
It is,
look
man.
back on?
Like you make the joke about views. Like if I posted mine, I'd say I would watch it. Like I'd be 50% of the views. So it's cool to just be able to relive that. It's awesome.
Yeah, man. Yeah, the elk hunt was... I was actually really blown away by... I guess, to be honest, I thought, like... Because this was my first elk hunt that I wasn't, like... I filmed elk hunts before, but when I was actually hunting, it was like my first elk hunt. It was this crazy tag. I was really shocked at, like... And this is probably sound really stupid and obvious to some people, but how just different of an animal it is that you're hunting.
Yeah.
It's not a deer.
Right.
And yes, spot and stalk tactics are going to be similar, but especially, like... when they're rutting, when they're bugling, when that's a factor, and like, you know, kind of chasing a herd and just understanding like how they move and like why and when and where, they're very different from deer.
I think to your point earlier in this conversation about just taking advantage of opportunities when you get them, right? If you can follow somebody on a hunt, if you can go, if you can, like whatever you can do to just get that experience, right? Mm-hmm. Be in the arena, right? There's no shortcut for that. And I mean, there's certainly a lot of things that we can do to get access to information and learn and kind of cut.
It's different when you're there
cut
doing
that
it.
learning curve, but you do need to be in them, around them, and
100%, dude. Like Kobe, he grew up chasing elk in Montana. And so he's hunted elk his whole life. He's an elk dude. So he's my camera guy in New Mexico, but man, he was helping me out so much. Just because it's just different, man. It
is. They're so much different from deer. And like if you think about how you have so much experience with deer, like you know what you can get away with. You know how
you understand
move,
them as an animal.
And so the only way to get to that point with elk is to spend as much time around elk as you have around deer. And it doesn't necessarily have to be hunting. It's just, it's not like you and I are going to be sitting in a house in Montana or Colorado looking out the window watching deer the way that
we do,
right, the way that we can.
The backyard whitetails.
Right.
But yeah, man, super cool. So the people help you pack it out with their horses?
They did. So we quartered his Tuesday night. We left the hindquarters in a tree. All good? Yeah, his was all good. So left his hindquarters in a tree, took the front quarters and the back straps, all the trim, everything else, took that back to camp, hung that, came back in the next morning with a horse. We got the skull and the hindquarters. And in a matter of 20 minutes, this is funny because I actually looked at this in the pictures. It went from no snow to several inches on the ground. And we packed out in the snow with horses. Cool. It was really cool.
That is cool. I've always wanted to do a horseback hunt.
Yeah. And so, you know, that was to be able to put his entire elk on one horse and just lead that horse out And
You
then,
really got like a freaking painting of an elk hunt.
we got the full experience.
Yeah.
It was really cool.
Really cool hunt, man.
Just amazing memories. And all of that was by Tuesday. And we
So what day of that? Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. So day 5, you're out of there with 2 bulls and an amazing hunt.
And so he had actually picked up
On an over-the-counter unit.
Over-the-counter unit, any bull. We had 2 bulls down, and
they're nice bulls too.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're not like dinkers
They're
or
not
spikes or
raghorns.
anything. No, they're nice bulls.
Mine was a 5x6. His was a 4x4. Some people might call that a raghorn, but I'm not.
Whatever, they were cool. They had good frames and they were good bulls.
And he actually picked
General
up a cow tag.
I'm trying to find the picture of it.
They're cow tags of ours.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can show you. So he had a cow tag. So we went.
Kept hunting.
Yeah, Tuesday. I guess it was Tuesday night. We went back to town to drop his meat off at a processor. We got an Airbnb, got some hot food, took a shower, cleaned up, and then we went in Wednesday through Saturday morning, trying to fill his, or I guess Wednesday through Friday.
To kill a cow.
To try to get a cow for him. Now, that's where it got a little Western, because the only units where you could take cows, they were basically, they were units where they're trying to cull cows to keep the elk off of private land in the winter. And so what you ended up with was all of those units were heavily roaded. You had small patches of public surrounded by a lot of private. So a lot of hunting pressure. The only elk we saw during that whole stretch was a herd that was crossing a road. And we actually saw them on the road.
Wow.
And there were like 3 different cars where hunters got out of the cars and were trying to chase them off the road.
Oh my gosh, dude. You don't want to be that guy.
No.
You want to just put in the work and be the guy that can go in deep and kill 2 bulls like that.
And that was a lot more fun, a lot more rewarding, and
a lot more effective.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously stuff gets killed every year road hunting, but if you have a limited amount of time, you're better off to just put in the work.
Yeah.
Yeah, dude. Solid bulls. Yours has got pretty good mass and good frame.
It's so wide. Yeah.
Yeah, I would definitely shoot.
Oh, yeah.
100%. Either one of those bulls.
Well, like I said, I was going to shoot a spike. So when I saw that thing walk out and I saw how wide it was, I'm like, oh, man.
Yeah. And I mean, that's the other thing, too. I mean, when you're going out on, like, a lot of guys listening, you might not make it out west that often. So, like, I understand.
Well,
and certain species, you should be a little bit more aware of not shooting small. Like, mule deer are very sensitive. But at the same time, like, my first mule deer was tiny. And, sometimes on your first hunt, you get an opportunity and you just take it, and you don't need to be too wrapped up in it. But so I wasn't even that picky either, like on either one of my hunts, even though one was a killer tag and that blacktail thing, like, and I ended up shooting a huge blacktail, but I was like ready to shoot like a forky the night before. Yeah. Just because there's like good opportunity, you know what I mean? Like, so right. I don't know.
That's going to be, I don't want to say a problem, but like that, I think that's and I was talking to Brian about this, like my evolution as a hunter is to start to pass some of those younger
and that's good. Like I just haven't been that guy.
I'm not there yet either. And that's why I say like, it's not a problem. That's maybe not the right word, but like, I mean, even here, like when I'm hunting whitetail, like if I've got a tag and something walks by, like I will shoot. And so
I'm not like out there just indiscriminately killing, but at the same time, what I was trying to say is it's nice to not have that pressure on yourself. Yeah. To be like, okay, I'm going to go out and hunt. And if I see a legal animal, I'm going to take it. And there's nothing wrong with that.
For us, some of that was understanding the tag and the units, right? Yeah. And so like our tag, our unit was pretty much the opposite of your unit, right? Like you have a primo unit.
This is the hunt where guys hold out for a 360 because it might be their only chance in their life to get a 360.
Yeah, and so
I get that.
You go in and you're like,
but
hey,
it was different for me.
Yeah, like you didn't need a 360, but you also weren't going to shoot a 280 or 270, unless it was the last day of the hunt.
Yeah, like I wanted, my goal was, and usually is on most of my hunts, I want to go in and kill a not a baby, like a grown animal that's a good representation of the species. Exactly. As like I said, I'm in the point of my hunting career where I'm okay with that right now. Is there going to be a point where I might start passing stuff? And probably will, yes. And like I said, certain species are a little more sensitive than others, so you got to take things all into consideration. But I actually like being at this point in my journey where it's like, you know what? Like, I'm going on this awesome elk hunt, but like, I'm not going to like not get the experience of killing my first elk because I wanted to hold out for a 360.
Right.
Like, I'm going to try to get a nice bull. And that's what happened.
Yeah, and I hunt for meat. I hunt for the experience. I don't need my animal to impress. That's amazing. I don't need it to impress anybody else, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, like that's a beautiful bull.
He was beautiful, man.
Yeah. It's so dark too.
Yeah, just chocolate, really thick, massy.
Yeah.
5 points.
Like
grown animal.
Yeah.
And your all's bulls are awesome too, man. So, and the funny thing is, my hunt too. I went directly after that to a very similar hunt that you to just a general, basically over the counter Montana rifle hunt.
I did that one time. I think it was 2020. I did a week in Colorado and immediately went from there to Montana. That's tough.
Dude, by the halfway through the second hunt, I was like, I don't think this was a good idea.
Yeah. I've
because
only done it once.
I wasn't able to put my full effort and like my body was worn down, man.
Yeah, and I know a lot of guys will talk about like, oh, like when you're on your hunt, you shouldn't be thinking about home and things like that. But like when you're gone for 2 weeks, and I mean, you guys just had another child, like
17 days, and I have 3 kids at home. And I started to get a really bad cough, and like it was all the perfect storm. I'm not complaining.
Right.
Had a great hunt. Saw moose, saw good deer, and saw bulls almost every single day, except for when we had to move to the next spot, and including one like 280.
Okay.
So I actually see that hunt as a success because I was able to, like we talked about, e-scout from Virginia a spot. We got to a camp spot. It was super crowded, but we worked every morning to climb a small, I would consider it a small mountain, probably by some people's standards more of a hill, but enough to where we were in a packed out campsite. Walked right from camp up a hill. Nobody was up there.
Yeah.
And we saw bulls and elk every day, and including one really good one. There are some things I would have done differently that I might be able to get a shot, and I think it might have been different had I not just come from a really tough elk hunt. There was a lot of elk on my first hunt, but it was still very physically demanding, doing multiple like 14-mile days in a row and up and down. So anyway, it was tough. I was thinking about doing something like that this year with deer. But I'm reconsidering that because I don't know. It's just a lot.
I like having that, like go hard for a week and then come home, and I've talked to Brian about this a lot, and when he hunts his Montana tags, he's able to break that up and do that. And I mean, he's talked a lot about that strategy on his podcast, where he's really fortunate that he can go hard for a couple of days and then come home and see the family. And if he hunts,
we have a day of travel on each end at least.
Yeah, and
another day of logistics if you kill something.
He may spend 20 days chasing elk in Montana every year, but they're not consecutive.
Right. You can go out for the weekend, or if you get off work early or something.
Yeah.
And that's when it's a totally different game, and then we have to approach it in a different way.
Exactly.
It's not the same. You can't compare it. And also, it's different when like Brian or myself, you're like actually trying to create all this content. It becomes, for me anyway, it's like, okay, I'm going out west. How do I leverage and get the most out of my trips and time?
Yeah, and so that's what you just talked about is like that's a whole extra dynamic to your trips, right?
Yeah.
And you talk about like wanting to be present and enjoy the moment, but you're also trying to get content and create media, but also not just the being present, but the animal that you harvest, right? Like if you continually shoot, antlerless or, spikes or whatever.
At some point I'm expected to start killing some big stuff.
Right. How do you,
which is weird.
How do you juggle that or reconcile I don't want to say the expectation, but the media creation with your own experience?
Yeah, it's tough because, the bottom line is big animals attract more attention. And it's just I don't wish it was that way, but at the same time there's nothing bad about it either, because if you look at trophy hunting from a conservation perspective, I think it does make sense. You let the animals, young ones, go to breed, and when they start getting old and less whatever, fertile or whatever it is, however you want to say it, that's a better time to harvest that animal. They might be getting towards the end of their life anyway. So I don't think it's a bad thing or a good thing. It is kind of, there's always good and bad and everything, right?
Yeah.
So there is some weird not always positive dynamics that come into being a content creator as well, and like a producer and stuff like that. But you just got to take it with a grain of salt and say, you know, that's the bottom line of what I deal with if I want to continue to try to do what I love and provide for my family doing it somehow, which is not easy.
No, it's not. No. I think, you know, to your point, it also gives you an opportunity to educate maybe non-hunters or even early or new hunters on the advantages or benefits from a conservation standpoint of chasing harvesting mature animals, mature age class, as opposed to the younger
killing
ones. Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. I like to, I don't know. That's a whole other podcast, but certain companies have chosen to start sterilizing their hunt films. And I think it starts with language, and I'm not getting on you. I don't care if people say harvest, but I personally don't want to get to a place where I don't feel comfortable saying killing.
Yeah.
And showing it.
Oh, I'm with you. Yeah.
Anyway, that's a whole other podcast, man. And I do.
You probably got to go pick up some kids.
Yeah, I got to pick up my kids soon. Yeah. So I do want to, like, you know, start heading for a landing. Although I feel like we could keep talking forever because this is a good conversation, and it's really nice to talk to someone in person, man.
It is, isn't it? Like, that's one of the reasons I've stopped doing Better Human Project is, like, I'm just not traveling as much. It's hard to get people to come here for a podcast, and I have a hard time going back to Zoom. Like, you get used to the in-person conversation.
I think I'm fortunate that I've always been used to the Zoom thing, but I will say this is really nice to be able to do this. So I'm glad you're able to come here and do it, man. Thanks for coming by. Yeah. I don't know, any other major like takeaways or just closing thoughts?
I think just kind of maybe looking back and wrapping it up, summarizing, recapping, you know, learn as much as you can, take advantage of all the access to information that technology gives us, find mentors, get as much experience as you can, get in the arena. And this doesn't just apply to hunting. This is whatever. You
said a lot of really good stuff, all back to back really fast.
Whatever it is that you want to do, right? Any pursuit. And you know, view it through the lens of the long game, and, you know, how do I move the chains and get better season after season, year after year. And, you know, find great people to do it with. You know, as far as elk hunting goes, patience. I think we've touched on this and even said it a couple of times, but regardless of the animal that you're hunting or species, finding them, right? Like, that's rule number one. Like,
and don't leave elk to look for other elk.
Yeah. Even if you don't fill a tag, the hunt experience is way different if you're in animals daily, as opposed to specifically the animal that you're targeting.
100%.
You know, that makes such a huge difference. And I think if you're new to hunting any species, figuring out how to be able to find them on your hunts as quickly as possible will help you just get more enjoyment out of those hunts.
Yeah. It's one of those things that's like so obvious that it's not obvious.
Yeah.
You have to find the animals first. But like, if you think about it that way, it almost makes it easier. And doing things, like, you just summed it up really great, man. Other thing I would say maybe is, like, one thing I learned kind of from the beginning phases of planning a hunt too, when you're from out east or whatever, is kind of breaking your, like you did, using data or whatever to break your hunt area into like manageable sized chunks. Whether you have to start, sometimes you start with the whole state or half a state. Sometimes you start with a unit. So for me in New Mexico, like, I took the unit, I broke it up to some 3 manageable chunks, kind of different terrains, and said, what do I want to hunt? And then you just kind of, you start, it's like a funnel. Start high level and just start chipping it away until, like, I like to say, like, tightening the noose until you're on that thing about to pull the trigger. But you have to start, you know, high level. And just look at it like that. So everything that he just rattled off was like gold. So, like, you should listen to that again. But great way to end it, dude. Anything else?
I think that's it, man.
Yeah. Well, it's been good talking to you, dude.
Yeah, always fun to catch up, man. Congrats on your elk, your blacktail. It's been a great hunting season.
Dude, it's been amazing. Caribou bull, blacktail.
Oh, that's right.
Boone and Crockett blacktail. Probably not officially yet. So the elk.
Are we going to see all of these videos in season 2 of Hunter's Quest?
Yeah, most of them I've been releasing, like, the kill sequences as reels already. I just literally before you got here posted the caribou sequence, kind of, which I don't know if you guys want to weigh in on this, like somehow get a hold of me. I used to never want to show like the kill sequence before film came out because I thought like more people would want to watch it. But I feel like today, like if you look at like YouTube thumbnails, they're usually the guy with the animal.
Yeah.
And so like I feel like hiding the outcome is not. Plus, these are going to release a year from now, so I don't think it's hurting me to release that on social. Do you? Because it's helping on social.
I think you're onto something. I would agree with what you just said. I think your new strategy is probably a winning one. And I'll weigh in. I'm not going to say the name of the channel, but there is a channel that will put a thumbnail on their YouTube videos and they'll show a big bull.
But they won't kill one.
And they may not kill it in that episode.
Yeah, I've seen that before. I always feel cheated when they do that, though.
I do too. And so, but I think what they're doing is they understand the same psychology that you just mentioned, right? Like you show big bull, people are like, oh, there's a big bull in this episode. I'm going to watch this one. So, yeah. Yeah.
So I basically look at it like that. I was like, you know what? These are fresh hunts. I'm excited about them. I want to share. I don't want to wait a year. And it's totally fine to do that. So I'm going to do it. I hope people still watch the stuff, but
I think they will, especially like you said, the whole episode comes out, full episode comes out a year later. So
yeah. How do we even get on that anyway? I don't remember.
I was asking about season 2 of the Hunter's Quest.
Yeah. So that'll be coming out starting quarter 3 of 2024.
Okay.
So I'm going to have all summer basically to edit stuff, and I have a couple more hunts left in the season.
Yep.
And then those will start rolling out. And then I got some really exciting YouTube releases coming as well. Nice. Different edits of stuff and stuff like that. So shameless plug. If you're listening still, please just hit the subscribe button on my YouTube. That'd be super helpful. But yeah, tell folks where they can find you if they want to check out more of your stuff or your book or whatnot.
Yeah, book is, as you said, F Your Feelings. That's on Amazon, it's on Audible, it's on my website. My website is ryanmunsey.com. That's probably the hub of all the activities. So if you want to find out what else is going on, I'd say go there, and that's the spot.
Cool, we'll definitely recommend the book for guys. So thanks again, dude, and yeah, let's hang out again soon.
Absolutely.
It's been too long.
Yeah.